All right.
Hello, ladies
Sorry,
and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, though a bit unprepared, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn?
I'm prepared. I was just in the middle of important research when you called. I needed to find the lyrics of The Grinch is Gonna Get You.
Please stop saying that. Now I'm frightened. Like, I'm legitimately frightened that the Grinch is gonna get me.
And that's how it works. That is how Halloween is Grinch Night is actually a really decent Halloween special, despite the fact it's a terrible Dr. Seuss special. Because it is legitimately fucking terrifying.
Jesus. I forgot that we could swear on our podcast. Like, you just swore, and I'm like, oh, God. Oh, God. My ears.
Yeah, it's
My
'cause I was talking
virgin
about Dr.
ears.
Seuss. There's a line. We do not talk about him in this tone. Yeah, man. No, I've rewatched Halloween is Grinch Tonight. I can't remember if I really got into the depths of that film that I watched last year for Hollow watching, but I've done that this weekend, and ever since then, I've just been thinking everywhere I go, the Grinch is gonna get me.
Grinch is gonna get you. He gonna get you.
Rich and who's for a laugh you. That's still a line of that song I still don't understand.
Who's for a laugh ya?
I think it's like Grinchin, like exclamation mark. Who's for a laugh? Question mark. Yeah! Exclamation mark.
This makes me want to talk about literally the weirdest Halloween special I've ever watched.
It's not Grinch Night. Halloween
I don't think
Grinch
I've ever seen Halloween is Grinch Night. Is it animated?
animated, and it's only 24 minutes long. I don't think it's not like it's like a 40-minute endeavor or anything like that. It's a short one.
I mean, I'm sure I could watch it. I mean, I also feel like The Wonderful World of Dr. Seuss, that was the puppet one that was on Nick Jr.
Wobulous World of Dr.
Wobulous. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I
do remember
forgot
the
that
Wobulous
Theodore made up words. That in the Wobulous World of Dr. Seuss, the Grinch was like weirdly a character all the time, and I feel like they also gave him a Halloween special as part of that.
Oh man!
So if you want to hunt that down,
yeah, no, don't. You know what? I should put a PSA out there. Don't go see Halloween as Grinch Night. It is a terrible special that culminates in a 10-minute drug trip. It's very weird. What is the movie that Seuss made? He the 10,000 Fingers of something, like, right? Isn't that him?
that's something like that. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head.
It's very much in that vein. So that movie, without being able to remember the title in its complete, anyway, is a very Andy Warhol style, like, filmmaking for anybody that knows what he was doing with film. So it's very bizarre. It's all about like really weird imagery, surrealism, all that stuff, right? But also with like a pop element because there's like fancy colors and all that shit. And so anyway, so when they make the Dr. Seuss movie, it falls into that vein, and it actually makes sense. It works really well, right? It feels like after the success, quote unquote, of that is what led to a lot of like people's imagery of what Dr. Seuss must be. So you get a lot of stuff like, like Halloween is Grinch Night, where it feels like it's like The Grinch Stole Christmas, but then there's like legitimately there's this really weird layered on element of like psychedelicism. Like, it's very, very bizarre. But it's a special that defies you to watch it every step of the way. Every second you're just like, this I should turn this off, right? And I feel like I did a lot of that kind of watching this week, and we'll get into that later, but felt like everything I was watching this week was just like, do you really want to be watching me right now? And I just kept saying, no, I don't think I do.
Are you sure you want to keep watching? Yes, Clippy, I'm sure. Clippy is the hero that we need in modern times.
I noticed you're watching a shitty video on YouTube. Are you sure you want to keep playing it?
Yes. I'm just annoyed because it's you asking me, Clippy. All right, so...
Yes, I have a stupid podcast I have to do stuff for.
Since we're talking about Halloween specials,
yeah,
and ones that are just weird, the second episode, it has to have been the second episode, of Two Friends on a Couch, I was on Facebook, and someone had posted that the Boo! A Curious George Halloween was too scary for their children. So I'm like, well, I need to watch it for my budding podcast career and comment on it.
Things we do for these shows, man.
And that is such. It's first of all, it's good, right? Where Sejohn says, "Do not seek out Halloween is Grinch night." The Boo, a Curious George Halloween, is actually very enjoyable.
Excellent.
I will say that like from the top of it. And now I'm
That
going
legit
to
might go on the
spoil it.
list for tonight.
Yeah,
Like this
it's
legit might go on the list for tonight then.
but the reason why it's so weird to me is putting it in the under the filter of this was too spooky for my 5-year-old. Because no,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, it's
Oh,
not too spooky for a 5-year-old. In fact, it does something that I wish more Halloween specials did, and
they
that
kill
was
Curious George. This is a reality of life, children.
and what it does is, so I used to be super like, oh man, all this stuff is real, ghosts and witches and werewolves and all that. When's gonna get you? That like I used to believe in a lot of occult and supernatural things.
That was your occult voice. Anyway.
And well, I don't know where it comes from, but I did believe in that stuff, and I still have a
Yeah.
lot of interest in it, and I would love nothing more than for it to be true. I mean, the Ghostbusters video game came out remastered. We're going to talk about that later this episode, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of Ghostbusters. Like, for a time, that was the job I wanted to do. My dream job as a 5-year-old was to be a Ghostbuster. So first of all, you need to consider that at 5, I was watching Ghostbusters. So I don't think that something that is specifically created and geared towards children is going to be very spooky.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's also important to note that you're not saying that in terms of like, so like maybe you're biased because no, like Ghostbusters was being watched by kids. Like that
Yeah.
is that is the level at which like that kind of entertainment was being consumed.
Yeah.
Devon was not the only child at that age consuming that movie.
Right. Well, I mean, the first movie really wasn't made for kids. The second one was, arguably.
Well, the second one is made for kids with the understanding that while they didn't make the first one for kids, that's what ended up being their audience.
Right.
Like that's the thing.
And then you also look at the cartoon, and the cartoon is way scarier. Like that was something I probably shouldn't have watched watching it as an adult. Like the Halloween Samhain episode where like the pumpkin-headed ghost is like, I will rule all of New York. That's legitimately freaky as an adult. And as a kid, like, I'm sure it bothered me a little bit, but I've always, the long story short is, as I've grown and studied all of these occult things that definitely piqued my interest as a younger man, I have found explanations for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And this all culminates in 2015. I go down to New Orleans for Dale's 21st birthday. That's when Will and I eventually got stuck in, Bowling Green with you. And we go on. Well, we did pop a tire. Like that part's still true. But yeah, and we went on a ghost tour, and that ghost tour was so not fun. Like, despite the guy who ran it, like, really giving 100%, the stories were just so like, oh, well, this is what actually happened. Like, there's the rational explanation for this. And I really think that the start point of this, and I swear I'm getting back to Curious George, I promise I'm getting back to Curious George. The start point for all of that came from working at an old theater. It was a courthouse that had been converted into a theater, and I had done the light design for The Graduate, and it was tech. Yep. And so I went through, I teched the show, as you do. If you do theater, everybody knows about the dress rehearsal. The tech rehearsal is where you test like light, sound, practical cues to make sure that they work, and so that the actors are aware of it, and also that the actors aren't going to be hurt by any of them with their blocking.
Sorry, this just turned into Inside the Actors Studio
I'm
here
so
with Devon's
sorry.
Path. Like, this is what we used to do this, and
right. So anywho, the tech was for The Graduate, and really that theater was not run as professionally as I would like a theater to be run. I'm just going to say it. So I had designed the
Very
show.
political. Very nice, Devon. Congratulations on that response.
I'm just being honest. But I had designed the show during the day before my first tech. So
Oh,
I hadn't really gotten a chance to like do a run through of the show at all.
okay.
Like I had just like, well, we're gonna see it. We're gonna do it live, I guess. And like you do during tech, as Sejohn can attest to, you take notes of
Right.
things that maybe didn't work, or like if a transition is wrong, or on any number of issues that you might have.
Mm-hmm.
So, after the show, I sit down with the director, and he has his notes about the tech stuff. I have my notes about the tech stuff. And we go through, and a lot of it was very similar stuff, like this transition was too fast, blah, 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 blah. But one that we had was, there's a light that's on. There's an errant light that's on in a couple of these. I go, yeah, I had noticed that. I took note of the cues. Give me 5 minutes. I'm sure I just messed up while I was programming that particular scene. And the stage manager, honest to God, said, no, we don't need to do that. That's just the ghost. And
okay.
like silence in the theater, and I'm like, no, it's not a ghost. It's human error. And now that we don't have people on stage and we're not running the show, 5 minutes, I bet I can fix it. And she was adamant that there was no way I would ever be able to fix this problem with the lighting, because it was the ghost playing tricks on us during tech.
But
So I'm like, well, I'm not leaving today until I get to check those cues. I want to check the cues, and I'm going to see if it is this mysterious ghost that you believe in, or if I made a mistake. And I go to the cues, and sure enough, light 7 was set to 10%, and that was why it was up. I had hit 10 instead of 00 in the programming, and then because I'm an efficient light designer, I just copied over that cue when I built everything, unbeknownst to me that 7 was at like 10%.
Right.
So I fixed it.
And then the twist of this story is that the stage manager then locked the door and revealed she was the murderer the whole time.
I wish. No, she like, I mean, come to find out, personally, I think she just wanted to go home. And it's like, no, but like we have the theater till 11. It's 10 o'clock. Let me finish my job. I don't want to come back and do this tomorrow. Like, literally, that was the big issue, was I had one too quick transition, so I added a second to it, and I had to get rid of 7 in 4 scenes.
Oh, man.
But ever since that, I have been a lot more skeptical and searching for the real world explanation, and realizing that most people who are afraid of ghosts or blame ghosts are just lazy.
But they are the ghosts inside.
So like, I'm just going to blame the ghost. No, it's not a ghost. There's got to be a rational explanation for it. Even if, like, I didn't do it wrong, there's probably a short in that dimmer, and I need to look at the dimmers. Like, there's an old building. There's explanations for things.
Yeah, but no joke, though, we used to have a ghost in our house. Zach is probably going to kill me for telling the story, but Zach used to like sleepwalk like really, really bad. Like one night, this is a side story. One night while up with my mother watching like a movie of some kind, he came down the stairs with like all of his laundry in his hands and starts going out the front door in just like a t-shirt and boxers. And my mom just goes, "Hey, bud, where you going?" And he just goes, "I got to throw the clothes out." And my mom just goes, "All right, but why don't we do that in the morning when it's light?" And he just goes, "Oh, that's a better idea." And he just goes back upstairs with all the laundry in his hands and goes back to bed. So that's the level at which my brother used to sleepwalk, right? And so there was a period after my my paternal grandmother passed away. So she was like, she was a funny woman. Then I will just leave it at that. She is where I got my sense of humor from. But anyway, so she passes away, and a few months later, we start having this weird thing happen in the house where the TV that we have in the house, this like new like big screen TV that we had gotten at Christmas, just kept like turning on in the middle of the night and very specifically turning to the QVC channel. And like it would just be on, and like we would all hear it, and like I would wake up and my dad would wake up and be like, did you turn that on while you were downstairs? And when we realized we didn't do it, so we all start blaming Zach because he sleepwalks all the time, and we're just like, Zach, you had to stop. Zach, you had to stop doing this. And he's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. But then it also starts to happen when he's not home, like if he's staying at a friend's house or if he's out camping and suddenly the TV is on at night, and sort of like, okay, so it's not Zach. And then one night, I was not the one to find him this way. My mother did. She goes downstairs and she finds him downstairs by the TV, which is on QVC. And she goes, oh, Bud, turn the TV off. You can't be turning it on. We're trying to sleep, all this other stuff. And he just goes, I don't know. Grandma just wanted to buy something really quick. And we have never been able to not stop like telling that story or thinking about it. It was just like the weirdest idea because when she was alive, she fucking loved QVC. After she died, for months on end, my grandfather would receive packages of stuff that she had ordered that it was just like 6 or 8 weeks away. So she like there was just we he actually ended up putting together like care packages for everybody at Christmas of all the shit that had been showing up at his house that she had ordered before she died. And so like that's where I've got blankets in this house still from her going on that. We have Christmas ornaments and like pot holders. So she was ordering shit from them all the time. And it just never occurred to us until he said that very creepily, half asleep as he stared at the TV, sleepwalking. Like my my mom was just like, that explains a lot, but also opens a whole other can of worms.
Cool.
Ghosts exist.
Again, if I ever saw evidence, I would be over the moon. Over the moon. And I'd probably buy a firehouse and figure out a way to capture and contain them. Back to Curious George, because that's what this is all related to, is Boo, a Curious George Spooktacular Halloween. In the thing is Halloween in the town that Curious George lives in with the man with the yellow hat, and there is a I love it. I absolutely love it because it's based on a well-known folk tale, like well-known urban legend. But there is the rumors of a ghost called the No Noggin, and what No Noggin will do is take your hat if you're walking down the street. It will steal your hat. Okay.
This is just creepy enough that it's like, I don't dislike this. This is making me uncomfortable, actually.
Right? So No Noggin steals your hat, which is why in the small town that Curious George and the man with the yellow hat live in, everybody says in October when they say goodbye, hold on to your hat. Like real world building in this Curious George Halloween special. And as they go on, it turns out that the No Noggin legend, spoilers for Curious George, Boo, a Spooktacular Halloween Spectacular.
It's just goblin backwards. No, what is it?
No Noggin is a squirrel, and it has been a group of squirrels like forever, going back like this squirrel and his ancestors, which is why it's such a like forever story.
My God. And now, son, it's your turn to steal the hats.
And the reason why they steal the hats is because the ground freezes really early in the town. So like his great squirrel grandfather realized that if he stole hats, they were the perfect place to store acorns for the winter.
I'm sorry. I have to ask a very basic question about this special. Is this a world in which the animals talk in Curious George?
No, the animals do not talk in Curious George.
How are you getting all of this information? There's such an elaborate history here. Is it like scenes of Elvish on screen where like they're just translating the squirrels? Like what is happening?
So what it is I mean, I'm filling in some of the gaps. I am assuming, obviously, it is an assumption on my part that this squirrel and its family have been doing it forever because the legend of No Noggin isn't like new.
It has to be this, because if it's not this, how has it been around for 100 years?
It's so ingrained in the history of the town. And like Curious George, the man in the yellow hat are new to the town because it's one of those things where like Clifford is probably the best example because I watched a lot of Clifford growing up, where they moved from the city to like an island so that Clifford would have more space because he's a giant fucking red dog menace.
Right.
Clifford is a
Right.
metaphor for communist Russia.
Clifford is a metaphor for children, as seen in the movie Clifford with Martin Short, who
Ooh.
plays a child in that movie. Isn't that weird? Anyway.
It's a little weird. So the Curious George thing, instead of having him continue to live in the city where he can go to, the museum and cause all sorts of problems, breaking T-Rex skeletons, the man in the yellow hat decides that he's going to move with George to this country town. So they're like new to the country town. And I think, like, again, I've only ever seen the one episode. I don't know the larger mythos of the Curious George PBS series. but I'm under the impression that the man in the yellow hat grew up in this town.
Okay.
And like then he moved to the city when he became a yellow suited adventurer. And now that he has a monkey child, I'm gonna go back to my hometown. Yep. They don't ask a lot of questions. They believe that there's a monster stealing hats.
I can take these idiots for everything.
Yeah, like seriously, the Music Man ever came by, Lyle Landley, they all screwed.
But see, like, I feel like if he is moving back to this town where he must clearly know about the hat, the no-noggin hat stealer, he's really putting a lot on the line. He basically, his entire identity is tied up in
his hat, right?
And like, if he goes back to that town and his hat is stolen, who does he become? So he is the real ghost of this special.
So another detour. As a child, that bothered me so much. That bothered me so much as a child. And I mean, you know me, Sejohn. So you can attest if what I'm about to say is true or not. I call people by their names. That is just what I do. I call everybody by their names.
Concept. How odd.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, I never called him Mr. Rogers. I called him Fred.
Okay, you call people by their first names. That's different than saying that you refer to people by their God-given.
That's a good point.
Like the family said that your name is Matthew, and so that's what I'm going to call you because I'm such a rebel. I guess it's very different than I use first names.
I called my teachers by their first names. Like it's just a thing that I did. So as like a kid, the fact that the man in the yellow hat did not have a name bothered me. To the fact that I gave him a name. His name is Andrew.
Andrew.
Because he kind of looks like Andrew. But yeah.
Andrew in the yellow hat.
The Andrew in the yellow hat. But yeah, so, but he is the one who relates the story of No Noggin as if he's heard it for generations.
So he could just be pulling shit out of his pants.
But he's not, right? Because you meet the old next door neighbor lady. She is like also telling No Noggin stories. Mm-hmm. And George, because he's curious, he's like, oh man, this no noggin thing. Like, I've never come up against anything like this before. But
I really want to live in this world where where Curious George and his friends have these kinds of conversations, specifically these voices. I like that he's played by like a deep-throated Danny DeVito.
Oh god, I would actually love a Curious George movie where Danny DeVito voices George. But yeah, so the other thing of the Curious George TV show is I guess it's sort of like Blue's Clues because there's like the whole, well, George, what do you want to do today? Oh, you're going to tell me later? All right. And then like throughout the episode, the kids are trying to figure out what he wants to do.
Yeah, right. There is an educational element, right? Where they have to like think. Yeah.
So the whole time George is what are you going to be for Halloween, George? And he's going to be a scarecrow, inspired by No Noggin is the scarecrow that steals your hat. That's the part I forgot until just now. So then Curious George is No Noggin, and he gets his hat stolen, and then they introduce in the first act his little squirrel buddy, and like I don't know if they're friends, but like they're aware of each other.
Yeah.
And Curious George also has a little girl who he's friends with. I don't remember her name. But they're walking there trick-or-treating together, him dressed up as a scarecrow and he loses his hat. And they're like, oh, it's the squirrel. Oh, he took your hat. He took everybody's hat. I guess that's what's been happening, is that he's been taking hats. And I'm like, well, that squirrel, it can't be 100 years old. Otherwise, you guys are burying the lead in this town with immortal squirrels.
We have immortal squirrels.
I mean,
We all drink their blood in order to live for years.
I mean, there is that I heard it, and I don't know if it's true, but the term "in a coon's age" comes from the fact that people believed raccoons lived forever because they all look the same. Jesus.
It's Halloween. We're walking away from that scary story.
Yeah, but so that's the whole thing. So I filled in the gaps that like he must have learned it from his father squirrel, who learned it from his father squirrel. That like hats, the perfect place to store acorns.
Oh man!
But the thing that I really like about the Curious George Halloween special is the fact that it presents something that would be scary and then tells the kids, but usually something scary has an explanation behind it. So if you go out and try to find it, maybe the world doesn't have to be as scary as you thought.
Right, exactly. The best way to combat fear is knowledge, which I believe is a fantastic lesson.
Which is a great lesson. And then I'm like, how is this too spooky for a 5-year-old?
Yeah.
It's not like...
No noggin, man. That shit scares the crap out of me, and you only just told me about it.
Well, my favorite thing is that No Noggin is very clearly a riff on that folklore story about the kids who, like, hid into trees at the highest hill on the way into town, and they stretched wire between the two trees, and then when people walked by, they'd lower the wire and lift off their hats so that people would think that a ghost took their hat. Like, have you ever heard that story?
That sounds like a much more fun story than where I thought it was going.
Then the end of the story is a guy's coming and they misjudge how tall he is and they end up cutting his head off.
Jesus.
In trying to take his hat off.
There it is. All right.
Spooky.
Yeah, no, see, like, I like how deep and like how well put together it sounds like that special is, because the Grinch one is just, it's a mess. Like, when it first came on, I'm thinking this can't even possibly be actual Dr. Seuss, but he's credited as writing it. I just doubt it. I highly doubt it. Because, like, the rhymes are terrible. The like, everything about his, like, his whimsy is just gone. There's music in it that is not memorable in the least. So it's just very weird because it's very much out of character for him as a creator. And then on top of that, the like lore that it establishes for the Grinch is insane, because apparently now everybody in Whoville is very much aware of the Grinch and has seen him. He's not just like a story, right? And then on top of that, like, he apparently comes down once a year to wreak havoc on the town. And it's never quite established exactly what he does until the last, like, 10 minutes. So for, like, the first 20 minutes of the movie, of the special, you're just like, what? Is he coming down to, like, murder anybody that's outside? It's like, it's almost biblical, the way that they're like, close up the house and, like, mark your door so that he knows to leave you alone. Like, it's just, what is happening here? And then it's revealed what he's coming to do, and it's even more insane than you think. He basically is coming down to sell drugs. And it's basically just, is very, very weird the way that he is portrayed in this, because it kind of undercuts a ton of stuff in How the Grinch Stole Christmas, especially the, like, redeeming factor. He is basically irredeemable. They turn him into a straight up dog abuser. It's like,
oh no, Max! He abuses Max.
It is kind of implied in the movie, in like How the Grinch Stole Christmas, that he's not great to Max, because like he's not great to everybody, but he like straight up refers to and treats Max as a slave. He uses the term "my slave."
Jesus.
Yeah, so it's pretty weird and dark and fucked up.
So the scariest thing about Halloween is Grinch Night is that, like, there are rumors about how bad people are, but then, oh no, they can be even worse than that.
Yeah, the reality is worse than the rumors, actually. Yeah. So it's very bizarre in that way. And it's funny that you mentioned, like later on, like, the Grinch becomes such a weirdly, like, beloved character on things like Wubbulous World. We literally just had a remake of the Grinch come out this year that was more than well received. Like, it's going to be a pretty instant Christmas classic, this new version. Like, it's funny to me to think about what that character is and seeing that special again, because I've watched it multiple times in my life now, and every time I find new ways to be confounded by it. That's all.
That's fun. That sounds like a fun way to live. That sounds
Oh
like a fun
man.
way to live. All right. So, you wanted to talk about something, and we talked about it briefly before we recorded, and I said no. But then I thought about it. I want you to talk about it.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
fucking talk about
because
it. I don't even okay. So what we're dancing around for some weird reason is like we're sitting here in prime spooky time and also a prime Batman time because the Joker just came out. So they made a spooky Batman movie.
spookier than
It's
Batman and Robin.
no, it's actually not. So the Joker's come out this weekend, and like it's a pretty decent deal. Like it's everybody's been kind of talking about it in controversial terms, but I think one of the biggest things that's maybe disappointing about the movie for me, and I'll tell you, oh man, there's a lot to be disappointed about in this movie, and but with one of them weirdly is the fact of how not controversial it is. There's really any of the like weird hype around like the inspiration of violence or anything like that. I can see in pre-release like why we would be worried that would be one of the things that's going to come out of this, but that I don't think that's what we're going to see for a lot of reasons. Not that this movie does not have that kind of messaging and that kind of tone and idea to it. There's a lot more going on that I think is really going to undercut that. Not least of which the fact that I find the movie very boring, Devin.
Well, that's weird because he's the Joker, and
The
he's
movie's
like
very boring.
not boring.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, it's just there's so plain and simple. The concept of the movie is clearly this is the origin story of the Joker, right? And for those that are not too in the know, it's very heavily inspired by Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, in that the one origin out of the many in the comics that they decide to go with is the idea of Arthur Fleck, I believe is the full name. He's a stand-up comedian failing in the 70s and is beat down by the state of Gotham at the time to the point where he snaps and becomes the Joker. That's the Killing Joke, right? What this movie decides to do with that particular material, that's to be seen. You know, I don't want to get too deep into like too many details about exactly where it goes. There's some weird choices it makes in terms of lore for a movie that everybody was really talking about it being removed from the world of Batman. It decides to hook itself in just in different places than anybody ever has before, shall I say. Um, so there's some choices like worth discussing. So like the weird feelings that I was having before we started recording, and I was texting you about how I kind of wanted to talk about it because mainly I don't know how I feel about it, and in a weird way, I think that's kind of an ideal situation for a Joker movie to come away from it feeling more chaotic and unsettled than when you went in. I think feels like the pitch perfect way to leave a Joker movie. So in that sense, I think I'm kind of happy with it. But on the other hand, like I don't care to ever see it again. I don't think that it does much to like move like any type of like stones it decides to pick up or turn over. Like it's weird because as I was saying, the controversy going into this is everybody's very afraid like where are we going to idealize this villain, this character that very much represents things like toxic masculinity and the idea of like the mob being turned by things like fake news and quote unquote jokes and quote unquote humor that is actually like deep seated in things like hatred and you know violence and things like that, right? Like so there's a lot of stuff that it's clearly going to have to touch on because it's a Joker movie, right? But it doesn't ever like do anything with that stuff. Like it presents it shows like hey, this is a thing that happens in the world, but then makes no comment on it. In a weird way, you're never even really given a sense that like maybe the Joker's right about some things, which I think is what a lot of people were really worried about with this movie, was that it was going to try and justify who the Joker is in a way, but it doesn't it doesn't ever dare to do that. It doesn't ever dare to say like maybe he has a point. No, it doesn't want to say that because it doesn't want to touch that controversy, but it also doesn't ever say he's not right. Like there's no Batman. Like that's the other big thing that I think everybody should know going into this. Don't expect like Batman to show up at some point. It's very clearly pointed out how he cannot exist in this world yet. There's some things going on in it that like the Batman's not going to be there. And so without the Batman to really kind of counter the Joker, there's really nothing stopping him, right? So there's nothing stopping him, but they also don't ever dare to let him go fucking like ham, which is in a weird way disappointing, but also like they didn't want to touch that, and I get it. So it just doesn't go anywhere. So the stakes are just kind of like moot because it does. There's no there's a climax, but I think you know what that climax is, like going into that movie. Like it's just very weird. I came out of it just feeling very mixed bag about it. I will say like good things about it. I mean, you cannot deny Joaquin Phoenix's performance in it, and I think that's what a lot of the really, um,
Sorry, what did you say his name is?
Joaquin Phoenix. Is it not Joaquin?
Joaquin.
Oh, is it Joaquin?
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah,
That pronunciation was awesome.
yeah,
I've only ever seen it written.
yeah. I've never actually had to say it out loud, I guess. I'm also probably altered, but there's the idea that like he's going to be the thing that everybody kind of hangs their head on when they talk about why this movie's going to do as well as it's probably going to do, because we're going to have to justify the fact that we are all kind of fascinated by this character, this concept, this idea. People are going to see it despite all of the weird controversy that came out, even separate from the controversy of the idea of like idealizing violence, but also all of the fucking bullshit nonsense that's been coming out of Todd Phillips since they decided to interview him, like all of the weirdness um around DC's like how this ties into the DC EU and all that, and the fact that it doesn't. I mean, they bury the DC logo in the final credits. They don't even show you like the DC logo until the end of the movie. So like they're very much stepping away from this being a comic book thing. And I think they've been very vocal about that. I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody either. But so anyway, so separate from all of that like weirdness and everything, people are going to have to come to terms with the fact that like it's still going to do well. It's going to gain an audience. It was number one this weekend with like a 250 million worldwide opening. Like that, it's made its money back. It's already a blockbuster. It's a hit. So there's no denying that it's going to be that thing that we're going to have to talk about now for the next couple of months until we all forget about it when the next DC movie comes out and we all hate it. But like, I think the thing that everybody's going to just latch onto in order to be able to talk about it is Phoenix and his portrayal, because he owns the movie, and to a sense he kind of, this genre of film, this style of film, this era of film that it's harkening back to, like depended so much on the actor. It's been compared to Taxi Driver, and it should be, because I think that Todd Phillips came out and said like we based a ton of the script on Taxi Driver, and like you can see that, right? And as much as Taxi Driver would not have been the movie it was without De Niro, this movie would not be the movie that it is without Joaquin Phoenix in that role, right? Like he just steals this movie and runs with it, and so that should be celebrated. I think that there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in what it tries to do with the lore. I don't know if I agree with it, but I'm always a fan of disruption in this sort of stuff, like people coming out and telling new versions of origin stories, telling new styles of like where people's powers came from and where their connections are. It leads to a lot of silly shit in comics where you have like you literally in the comics right now have 3 different versions of the Joker that people are trying to like vote on who's going to be the real version. Or another better example of that is something like the ages of characters. People that grew up with things like Young Justice are used to a set group of people being all around the same age, whereas you watch something like Supergirl and suddenly like Magan is much older and is actually a love interest for Jean rather than a like daughter figure to him, right? Like there's people that are kind of in that world already kind of deal with that sense of like the lore being kind of like malleable. So I'm interested to hear how people feel about specifically how this movie handles it, especially one that proclaims so strongly to not be in that world. They've definitely, as I said, like tied themselves into it. So I don't know, man. I'm not feeling great about it personally, but I don't think that I'm going to be able to like get away with not acknowledging it for the rest of my life. So I'm coming to terms with that, I think.
That makes sense. I guess the only question I have is, would Martin Scorsese consider it a film?
Yeah, yeah, I think he would. I think he legitimately would. On the one hand, I think that he would also kind of feel a little ripped off in a lot of places, but that's a personal thing, right? Like on the one hand, he could also just feel honored that this is this is a style of film that specifically this movie fits into really well.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he apparently hates comic book movies, so maybe he'll just be pissed. But no, I think that it falls firmly in that stupid argument of what is film and what is, entertainment. I think it falls firmly on the film side if you want to have that conversation. I'm not a fan of it, but I'll meet you
Oh, I'm,
there.
I'm not a fan of it either. It just seemed
Yeah.
like the funny thing to say
Yeah, yeah,
as
no,
a
I get it.
summation
But it's
because
but
the
it's true
world has
though.
been losing their mind
Yeah.
over Martin Scorsese saying these movies aren't films. And it's like, when did he become the guy who determines what a film is?
Yeah, yeah. It's the same shit we dealt with Roger Ebert years ago, talking about how video games weren't art, and we as nerds had to come to terms with that too. But like, I think it is a fair question though with this particular film because of how hard they're swinging for that fence. They're very purposely trying to say this isn't a comic book movie, which means that they're drawing a line. WB and whoever on that side is drawing a pretty hard line in the sand with their own people, which is pretty interesting. Todd Phillips I'll give or take. The dude is probably never going to touch another quote unquote comic book movie ever again. So I don't really care about that, what he feels about it. But like the people on the creative side of Warner Brothers who have been really pushing things like this movie's not like your regular Batman movie. This is a real movie. Like that through line that has clearly been out there for the last year, it feels really kind of gross.
Well, especially in the wake of, Nolan's trilogy.
Right.
Because there's that big part of me that, this one feels real and all that. And it's like, yeah, but the best part about the Nolan ones were how grounded in reality they actually were.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's like
Argument for me on that.
What'd you say?
You're not ever going to get an argument.
No,
from me
I
on
didn't.
that.
I didn't
I
expect
think
to.
Nolan proved that you can make a viable art film using comic book material. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, that inspired a lot of things going forward, where in DC's eyes, that's what a comic book movie had to be. And that's why you get something like Man of Steel, and even to a lesser extent, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Like movies that are like hyper realistic, and how do we ground this in the real world when that's not necessary. That's obviously not necessary. But then it's strange that Joker seems to be like their most successful one in the wake of all of that, discounting Wonder Woman, obviously.
Yeah, but Wonder Woman is very much not firmly rooted in the real world, right? And so what's interesting about both Wonder Woman and now Joker to point to is it also feels very much like those are the two films where they kind of stepped away and let the artists making them do what they wanted, and very, very evident in Joker with the way that they've let Todd Phillips do their thing. And I've said for years that that's what Marvel does best is they don't come in and tell the filmmaker how to make their movie. They tell them what needs to be in it, but they say like, do what you can with this material because we want this out there, but we want your vision to be the one to support it. And like DC's not done that. They've come in and said, this is the way to make your movie. They've straight up torn movies away from filmmakers and remade them on them. Like, as much shit as I want to give anybody out there that wants to see a stupid fucking Snyder cut of Justice League, Warner Brothers very much made that movie when he stepped away. I can totally see the that side of that argument for sure, right? Whereas like Joker is very much in the hands of Todd Phillips, where I think is, and that's where I think honestly where a lot of the failings come from, and it's why I don't lay the issues that I have with Joker at the feet of WB like I do with my issues with Justice League or Aquaman or any of the other ones that we brought up. You notice I'm not here shitting on like WB and saying like they've done it again, they fucked it up again. It's not them this time. Like I think they've actually knocked it out of the park for what they needed to do as a studio, which is also kind of a nice thing about this movie is they're finally doing something that I think they should have been doing all along with these movies and just let these directors like make or break these films on their own.
Well, especially if you're going to have James Gunn doing Suicide Squad 2.
Yeah.
Suicide Squad? Is that?
Oh man, why not that? Yes, that from now on this podcast.
Because if you're not gonna get James Gunn to do a movie so that he can just toe your company line. Yeah. You bring him in because you want his very specific vision and how he builds families out of mismatched groups of people.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, you don't bring James Gunn on and his ability to handle sensitive material with a light heart right? Like you utilize that. You don't ignore that. And like I said, like I think people are going to really dig this Joker movie in a way that maybe I don't necessarily personally, and I think that that's going to also be due to Todd Phillips, which I think we're going to have some serious conversations about as like artists again in the future. Like this isn't the last time we're going to have to talk about how weird that he has kind of become, you know?
I mean, especially when you consider he did Old School, which is like one of my favorite movies.
I was one of the most staunchest defenders of the entire trilogy of The Hangover. And like some of his attitude lately has made me actually reconsider that. And I hate that. Like I don't want to be that kind of consumer with movies, but like I've had to because of some of this weirdness that has come out about him.
Also, Due Date is a terrible movie. Nothing about it is good.
Didn't he also do 21 and Over or something? That really, really weird, like found footage, kids drinking movie that
Oh
came out.
yeah, I think he did have something to do with
Yeah.
that.
He's like, it's not super bad, it's even worse. It's just like, okay,
Because
come.
it all looks like it's really happening.
Yeah.
Cool. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, obviously, I was apprehensive to talk about Joker because I haven't seen it yet, but I think that says something that I haven't seen it yet. I mean,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons why I'm not going to shy away from it is because Dale was nervous something might happen at these screenings.
Yeah.
So she didn't want to go opening night. And then, like, as we talked through that, and, like, you know, you can't let fear because anything could happen at any time, right? You can't let that type of stuff.
Yeah, you should just be afraid always.
No, that's
I know
not.
what you
No,
mean.
it's try to. You can't succumb to fear. Is more what the lesson was.
Yeah.
We kind of broke into the fact that it's like it's not even just that. Like she was kind of using that as an excuse because she's not interested in it. And then,
It
like,
becomes a conversation of it's not worth the risk, which
Right,
is a
yeah.
weird conversation, but like, yeah.
yeah, but no, then, like, because we talked about it, because then, you know, she and Zach went to a concert yesterday, so she didn't work in the morning, and I'm like, what about a 10 a.m. showing of Joker? Do you want to go see that? And she's like, honestly, I don't want to see Joker, and I kind of use that as, like, sort of my scapegoat, but also, yeah, I don't want to see it. And then, like, now that I think of it, and now that I'm seeing how people are, like, reacting to it and everything, I feel like that might be where I'm at, too, is that I'm past the point in my life, and it's weird, because it's really only, like, a year removed from it, where I have to see every movie in the theater.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm not interested in a film, I'm just not going to see it. And
Yeah, man.
And it's...
Here.
And maybe that's... And I think it's, like, partial. I don't know. We started watching a lot of the new TV shows this past week. Like, we actually sat down and watched a bunch of the new shows. And I just feel like entertainment as a whole is wicked unbalanced right now.
Yeah.
Like, everything is trying to be everything. That sounded not as eloquent as I wanted it to. Every piece of media is trying to appeal to every audience member.
Right.
And it's making it so that it's not appealing at all. Because, I don't know. I mean, the best one is, like, All Rise. It's a CBS show, and it's supposed to be following a judge. And I'm interested in that, because I watch a lot of courtroom dramas. And I'm like, it'll be cool to see it from the judge's point of view. But the A story and the B story and the C story were two attorneys that she was friends with before she became a judge and their cases. Yeah. So it's like, we want to tell these stories from, like, a new perspective, a perspective you rarely see, right? I think that the last time was Judging Amy.
I was just gonna say Judging Amy is the only thing that comes to mind for me, because even the judges on, like, Ally McBeal were secondary characters; they weren't main characters.
Right. I mean, in all that guy's shows, David Lynch, is that his name?
Yeah.
In all of his shows, it was one of those things where, the judges are characters.
It's not David Lynch.
It's not David Lynch. It's
David, but it's the guy that did X-Files and all that stuff too.
Yeah, Ally McBeal, and then into Boston Public, and then Boston Legal. That guy. He did a bunch of shows set in Boston. And Ally McBeal.
And
where like judges were characters, judges weren't fully realized, and it's not like they haven't like given a great cast of judges, but like it would be interesting to see those stories that are being told from her lawyer friend's perspective, from that judge's perspective, and
yeah.
like lean into that. So
Yeah, I think a lot of shows feel like they have to play it safe, especially in pilots, but I mean more in the first season is what I mean. So like you see a lot of shows that grow up over time, right? So I'd be curious to go back to that show if it makes it in like 3 years and see what kind of show it is. I
I mean,
bet
I'm
you it'd
not
be
gonna
much more
stop
to talk
watching
about.
it. I mean, I'm definitely gonna give every show 4 episodes. I am a
Yeah.
huge proponent of the 4 episode test because I have just seen it like so truthful that a lot of the times it's the pilot is the pilot, and
Right.
the second episode is sort of like a second pilot because there's always changes from A to B, which is
Right.
weird. And then the third and fourth are like what you can come to expect now that we've told you what the show is going to be.
Right.
Like The Code, which got canceled, I still decided to watch it. I have 1 episode left. And in the second episode, they introduced Harper Lee as another prosecutor, and she is the secret best character of that show. And I don't think that they were unaware of that fact, considering she has had the most dynamic character arc in these 12 episodes of television. And it's just like, it's okay, but if I had just judged it on the first episode where she wasn't even there, yeah, I would not have kept watching The Code.
Right.
But then they bring in this woman who, like, is trying to do her duty to her country in the face of her parents and fiance saying, when are you going to be done with that and come back to the life you're supposed to be leading? And it's just like, this is interesting. I'm into this show. What?
Yeah.
I want more of her. Sorry, I've just been
No,
watching
man.
a bunch of stuff, and it's just, I feel that way about like just so many things now that
Yeah.
oh, this was a really good action movie, but the comedy stuff fell short. Like if you had just marketed yourself or tried to live as an action movie, I would have really enjoyed you. Game Over Man, the Workaholics movie,
Yeah.
all of the action stuff is great. The comedy is absurd. And like just gets more and more absurd as it goes on.
Yeah.
But the action sequences are legitimately engaging. I don't know. It's been a weird week for me watching stuff.
Yeah.
And
All around, man.
yeah, and like what's weirder? So the Ghostbusters video game re-released on Friday is the same game, except there's no multiplayer, and I missed it. I missed the multiplayer. I will be the first person to say that, even though the multiplayer was always broken in the first Ghostbusters game.
Yeah.
After playing for 3 hours on Friday night, there was this little bit of me that was like, it would be cool if I could just jump into a game with randos and bust ghosts with other human beings.
Yeah.
Like I missed that. But I'm leaning into this because we talked about Joker, and I had hoped to have seen Joker to go a step further. But when Ghostbusters Answer the Call came out, so the 2016 Die Staff remake, right? Or reboot or whatever. I bought the Blu-ray that came with the unrated version. And I never watched it. I had never seen the unrated version. So then, in order to get excited about the new Ghostbusters game, the re-release of the only good Ghostbusters game ever made,
Right.
come fight me.
Not the fucking broken one from that same year. I thought that's where you were gonna go, is you were gonna talk about that weird ass broken Ghostbusters game that came out a few years ago.
Oh my god, that one's awful.
Yes.
It's
Learn that the hard way. Yes.
yeah, but I think we both bought it for $1.
Yeah.
Like we got it very cheap. Like
I hope that's what I bought it
I
for.
rented it from Redbox when it first came out, and then I'm like, nope. And then I saw it for cheap, and I'm like, I'll beat it. Whatever. It's cheap. I still haven't beaten it because it's broken and awful.
Yeah, I can't get past the first level. It breaks on me, but before I can get past it.
Yeah. But so we decided that we were finally going to watch the unrated version of Answer the Call. And watching that movie, first of all, the unrated version was so much better than the one that came to theaters.
I honestly don't know the difference between the two because the one we have clearly has the unrated version on it, and I'm sure that's the one that we watch all the time. So I couldn't even tell you what the original
Are
one looked
there a
like.
lot of like callbacks to the original movie in it? Do you
I
recall
mean,
that?
I mean, there is, but wasn't there also in
No,
the release?
not to the extent that there is in the unrated version.
Okay,
Like it feels like part of the like reshooting they did, or as a response to the like outcry, was to try to trim all the actual callbacks to the original movie.
that's weird, but okay, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen the rated version in a while either, and there were
Right,
so
that's what I
many
mean. Is I
moments
can't
that
tell you now. Like I don't really recall much.
right.
But
But I
like the Harold Ramis like statue and like everybody like showing up and all that. That's in the theatrical release at
right,
least, right?
and that stuff
Okay,
is not the stuff I'm talking about. I'm talking about talking about
like lines
crossing
and
the
stuff.
streams,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like that kind of like I feel like that whole plot line is not in the rated version.
Yeah,
And again, I haven't watched the rated version in a while, but their original way to try to solve the problem is to cross the streams, and
right.
it doesn't work, and that's why they need to blow up the Ecto 1. And I'm like, that was cool. That was like different. Like, it's like, we can't be the same. We need to be different.
Right.
I dug that. But the weirdest thing about it, and again, maybe it's because like stuff was on my mind because Joker had come out the same day we were watching it, and I didn't see it, was if it was a beacon point for the incel movement. Because there's just so much rampant misogyny in that film. And just like the reaction to it from the internet. So like there was a moment where I paused it and I'm like, I have a theory I need to write down. And that is if when the whole incel thing started. And way
I mean, it's present before that.
oh, it's
Like it's
way
around
no,
that same
I've
time.
done the research.
Yeah, around that same time, you also get the Amy Schumer stuff that happens on Netflix.
Yeah.
That becomes such a problem that they actually Netflix is actually forced to completely change their rating system because of it. Um, Stuff like that. Yeah, like that was also going on.
Yeah.
It's not a great moment in time.
It's not a great moment in time, and it's certainly a point where you can point to like a growth in them, just like their presence in the world, and it's sad and it's disgusting, but like going back and seeing that the word originated in 1993 with like a positive thing, and it was a woman who like started using that term, and now what it's morphed into
Yeah.
is just like it was a sobering thing to do on my Friday after watching Ghostbusters Answer the Call.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just like it's just something that has been floating in my mind ever since I rewatched the movie, and I didn't realize how much of like because it's that thing where like, oh, Joker's gonna be glorified by these certain types of people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you know who's that certain type of people? The villain from Ghostbusters Answer the Call.
Yeah.
So like,
Well, yeah, and he is very clearly supposed to represent that type of person, and I don't think that there's any hidden. I don't think it's being subtle in that
not at the
metaphor at all.
least.
Yeah.
Like, and I said it to Dale, and she's like, no, he's just disenfranchised with humanity. And I'm like,
No, he's a privileged white male.
keep watching the movie, Dale. And she's like, yeah, okay, so there are moments where you're not wrong about that.
Well, and it's important that it's key that the first ghost that they go after is a scorned woman. She's a like the whole point of that first ghost like kind of lays out the rest of that movie. It's almost like that movie is structured super well and kind of good.
It's great. I
Yeah,
felt
that's
so
great.
good, like actually sitting down and watching it again.
Yeah,
I'm like, how could anyone not like this movie?
that's so
and,
good, man.
And then I'm like, well, maybe it's because it's the unrated version. And I'm like, no, because a lot of these things were there.
You know
Like,
why that movie's key for me? There's a lot of people in my life that were not Ghostbusters fans before that movie, and that movie really brought them on board in a really cool way. And there's even stories out there. The purest form of this story is there are dads out there that had young daughters that like they were nerds when they were growing up and they really wanted their kids to be into it. And that movie gave them a point for them to bring their girls to go and be part of their nerddom with them. It was something they could share. It became a cross section for them. And like I experienced that with a lot of my friends that just weren't into Ghostbusters before that movie came out. And so like that movie, I'll always have like kind of a rose tinted glasses for that film because it allowed a lot of my friends and family to come into my nerddom in a way that doesn't often happen with these reboots and remakes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, what I always think of with that movie is about a year later, someone like, I had written a comment about the film. I don't even remember what. And the person responded with, "There's going to be a sequel." And I had to be like, no, there's not going to be a sequel. I know that they set up for it. And I know that based on the money it made that first weekend, they were like confident that they were going to do more Ghostbuster movies with these characters. Yeah. But then they decided, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And that was sad at that moment. And it was sad having to relive it a year later and like having to dash someone's excitement about it to be like, I don't want to be this person, but like, please understand.
Yeah, man. I know the world kind of sucks when it comes to that sort of stuff, and it's part of the reason why I'm also feeling so squishy about the Joker stuff is because at the end of the day, it's a movie that even if it doesn't in itself glorify that kind of attitude and perpetuate, because it really doesn't. After everything that everybody's really worried about, I don't think it does much of that at all within itself. Man, the fucking environment around the release of it sure has like the stuff that has come out with like some of the stuff that Todd Phillips has said about it, and some of the ways that critics and commentators have been like really kind of using it in that way is really kind of upsetting. It's kind of set itself up to be misrepresented for eternity. Like it's just going to end up being misrepresented for eternity in a way that is not fair to the piece itself, but it is kind of asking for it in everything that it deals with, and then fails to not be that. You know what I mean? It doesn't counter anything that anybody's doing with it. So like in not countering it, it kind of just sets itself up to be used in that way.
Yeah, it becomes another focal point, another beacon for that type of person because of everything that surrounds it.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest disappointment of it.
Yeah.
Like that's the reason why I want to see it, is so that I can judge it on its own merits. Because I'm tired of
I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but to you personally, I would definitely say you should check it out, because I do think that there's a lot of really good stuff in it. You cannot deny this performance of Arthur is going to be talked about for a long time. So like that makes it worth it for somebody that's really kind of into that. But if you don't give a shit about actors, you know, then I can't really point to anything else that's really like redeeming in the sense that you need to go see it now.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I do. And I mean, I'm just going to make the decision when I make the decision. But there was no shortage of times that I could have seen it over the past weekend.
Yeah.
And I just didn't go. I could have gone after work on Friday to see a 4:00 showing. I could have seen a 4:00 showing on Thursday. Like, I've had nothing but opportunities to see the film. And the fact that I'm always like, I'm going to do something else. That speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, man. You're not wrong.
All right.
It's doing fine without you.
That's true, right?
Okay.
What, if I had gone to see it, it'd be 94 million?
Yeah.
Because tickets are so expensive out here.
Oh, man.
All right.
So anything else going on?
That's what I was going to say to you.
I do have one last thing. I told you guys last week I was going to start doing some Halloween video gaming. So this week, I kind of started diving into The Binding of Isaac. I had never really gotten too deep into it, but it was A, something that I already had, and B, I've actually been thinking about it for a bit because Cadence of Hyrule came out this year. And for those that don't know, Binding of Isaac is kind of a very similar game. It's roguelike, meaning that you're kind of dropped into this castle. You dropped into a dungeon. You don't really have anything on you but a basic weapon, right? And then from there, you can pick up weapons, make friends, all sorts of stuff that come along with you. But if you die, you have to start all the way from the beginning again. Nothing, right? And over time, really good versions of this, like Necrodancer and Cadence of Hyrule, you build up stuff that you do get to bring back in with you, so there is some sense of permanence with some things. You unlock certain types of weapons, you unlock certain like areas and things like that, and then you can continue to go to those things. And that's really good, like really cool, really well-built ones are that way. The issue that I had with Binding of Isaac when I first played it, 8 years ago at this point. I think it's like a 2010, 2011 game. It didn't have that sense of persistence then because it was so new, and it was basically started as a flash game, just like all of Macmillan's stuff had, Meat Boy before this. Um, it basically had this like sense of wanting to be a bigger game, but it couldn't be then. So the one that's on PS4 is Binding of Isaac's Rebirth. So it has like all of the DLC, all of these extra characters, all these new weapons, environments, all this stuff. So it's really a much more complete package and a much better package, I think. So I've just been diving into Binding of Isaac, dropped into a dungeon, moving around room to room, killing dudes, making friends, all that sort of good stuff. It's very clearly based in a lot of Zelda type stuff, so it is really kind of a natural move from Necrodancer to Cadence of Hyrule to this. It's actually been a nice kind of evolution, and I'm actually having a lot of fun with it. It's pretty wild. One of my very first runs, I think like my second or third. I won't say it was my very first one, but I got super lucky. I just got a bunch of good weapons off the bat, a bunch of good like power ups. I had like 5 extra hearts. I was just going nuts, like fucking just running through and just wrecking dudes. I had this awesome power up called Rage, like building the Rage. So after 2 minutes and like maybe not even that of firing, as long as I was continuing to like hit dudes, I would become invincible for a couple of seconds and actually do like some pretty like decent damage to things just by running into them. So like I was just like blowing through bosses, and I got to the last boss door and I was about to walk into it, and I thought there's a couple of extra rooms in this dungeon I haven't explored. I should go check those out really quick before I go in and see if I can get any more cool stuff. Sure enough, first one I walked into just got wrecked. I had just like all these extra hearts. The door locked behind me, which had never happened before. This thing came at me and just destroyed me in a matter of moments. And I was just like, no, I should have just I could have finished it on like a third run. I could have actually finished the damn game. And since then I haven't been able to get past like the third or fourth room. It's so it's just been kind of miserable. But it's good creepy shit. It's based very heavily in some explorations of the artist Macmillan, the guy that made Meat Boy this, and End is Nigh, I think is his other game that's out there. He's exploring some pretty deep personal stuff about his feelings about religion in that game, so you got to kind of like be ready for that. Dude's a little fucked in some ways. Meat Boy and this are the only two that I've really gotten deep into. I haven't played End is Nigh, but if those games are any sense of what his worries and concerns about the world are, the dude's got a lot of anxiety going on about some very dark shit. But it's good. Like he puts out some good stuff that like I just hope the dude's okay sometimes.
I get that. I mean, I've played it, but that's just not my style of game.
Yeah.
I like progress.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah,
I don't
for
need
sure.
a game to change every time for me to go back and play it again.
Right.
Like I like gaining mastery of a game and then like doing it that way. So
For
that's
sure.
why
And I think that Cadence of Hyrule would be a really interesting one for you to play because while there is kind of some of these elements of like this roguelike sense of a new thing every time, there is so much more persistence to that world and your weapons because it is also, I would say it's 2/3 a Zelda game, 1/3 a roguelike like Necrodancer. Like it is more Zelda than it is Necrodancer, and that's for the better because there's a lot more stuff that I think people like you would be much more interested in getting into. So if you do try any of these out, I would definitely just start there.
I mean, I played Cadence of Hyrule on my friend Justin's.
Yeah.
And my big issue with it, and I know this is going to be stupid, is I'm so not used to playing games with sound that having to do stuff in time with sound
Yeah.
threw me right off.
I haven't gotten deep enough into it to know if they do this, but Necrodancer, one of the big gets for it was that you could unlock other characters to play as, and each character played differently. And one of those characters that you unlocked very early on was called the Bard, where you didn't have to go to the beat. The beat would go with whatever you did. So you still had to keep things in mind. It changed the game fundamentally because it's not that the monsters are moving on the beat now, they're moving on your beat. So you just have to think, all right, now if I move 2 steps, that's 2 beats that creates this monster doing this, as opposed to before where like you're like, I could wait here for 2 beats and then the monster will be there. You can't do that with the Bard. So on the one hand, it takes away the music element, so you don't have to worry about that. But on the other hand, you do have to start thinking about the game very differently. So I wonder if there's anything like that in Cadence, because like I said, I haven't gotten deep enough into it, that actually kind of, again, fundamentally changes that aspect of it.
Yeah. I just played it for like a little bit. And, there were people around, so it was like difficult to like focus on the music and play it while people are talking.
For sure.
So it's one that I mean, if there's ever a sale on it, I'll probably pick it up. Or, I mean, I own Necrodancer, so I should probably cut my teeth on that and see if I enjoy that enough to spend money on Cadence. Also, since we're talking video games, Mega Man 3, I've long said I hate Mega Man 3.
Yeah.
I might be changing my mind about that.
Yeah.
After having beat it twice in the past week.
Now that you can beat it, it's not the worst game ever.
No. The reason, I mean, I think it's a poorly made game. I think it's padded. Its length is very padded in a way that games were done in like the early 90s. So like that's my biggest issue with that game. But playing it again, I'm like, you can get past it. It's only padded in the fact that, yeah, you have these extra bosses and replaying through levels again with like slight changes.
What are some of the bosses in 3 again? Remind me who's at 3?
So the big issue with 3 is you start with Magnet Man, Hard Man, and all that. Okay. But then once you beat the 8 Robot Masters, the 4 corners, you have to play through those levels again, but it's nighttime.
Ooh.
So like the lings are a little bit harder, or you need to like use rush in places you didn't have to before, and there halfway through the level you fight one boss from Mega Man 2, and then at the end of the level you fight another Robot Master from Mega Man 2, and it is 100% they just took the Mega Man 2 bosses and copied them onto like this doppelganger robot sprite. So it's not even like they bothered redoing the sprites for Mega Man 3. They did this one guy and then just copy pasted the movesets over from Mega Man 2.
Gross.
And and that's the reason why I don't like it. And then where like Mega Man 4, you have 2 castles that you have to go through in that game, but every level feels distinct and has a unique boss at the end.
Yeah, I mean, any sense that this is just like an American version thing? Like, is this something that doesn't exist in like?
No, because I've beaten the Japanese and European version of the game.
Yeah, okay.
But I think that's where I enjoy it is the Mega Man 2. There's the difficult mode, which they gave us a normal mode in America, which is easier, but difficult is what the worldwide release of the game is.
Right.
And that difficult mode is not satisfying. Like, it's a little bit too hard. So where I start to give Mega Man 3 a pass is that it feels good. Like, the difficulty feels correct. It doesn't feel too hard or too easy. Yeah. But again, I now see why 4 is my favorite in the series. Because
that's good.
It's a like wholly unique experience. It's not just like an expansion pack released.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I'm at. So that's been interesting to go back to Mega Man 3 and be like, maybe I don't hate you like I've thought I did my whole life.
That's good. That's always good. Finding out that piece of like culture that you just didn't seem to click with, like, because I mean, all Mega Man games have a following of some kind. It's always nice to kind of fall in with that following every now and then.
Yeah. So that's been nice. But we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. So if you want to talk to Sejohn about his feelings on the Joker, because I'm sure he has more to say, or recommend any new Halloween specials for him to check out, you can find him on Twitter at Siege vs. the World.
And if you want to hit Dev up with any Mega Man 3 trivia so that you can kind of really start feeding this obsession that he's going to start having over the next few months, you can find him at Devon D. Decker.
Well, thank you for that. Until next time, Will, hold on to your hat.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.